Okay, so you've done it, packed everything up, said the difficult goodbyes, landed somewhere totally new, maybe completely on your own.
Right.
And the pictures look great,
Right.
like this big adventure is happening.
Right.
But what's really going on behind that? Once the first wave of excitement fades, that's what we want to get into today, looking at all these sources you've brought in, articles, personal stories, notes, all about immigrant life, identity.
Yeah, exactly. These accounts, they sort of pull back the curtain, don't they? They show the emotional reality, the sheer weight of starting over somewhere else. It's so much more than just like finding a flat or figuring out the subway.
Definitely. So this isn't just about the logistics of moving. It's about the human side.
Yeah.
What do these stories tell us about that feeling of being alone, maybe unexpectedly alone? And how do people even start to navigate that? How do they find, a sense of belonging again? Let's explore that.
Yeah, let's do it. And that feeling often hits right at the beginning, doesn't it? The sources mention this maybe the first night or the first week. That initial buzz wears off and reality sets in.
Oh, yeah. One person described it so vividly, that first night, the silence, and just thinking, wow, I am really alone. What have I actually done? That feeling of having absolutely no one familiar nearby.
And it's not just about being physically alone in your room either. Several sources talk about feeling lonely even when surrounded by people.
Right, the lonely in a crowded room idea.
Exactly. You could be in class or at a work event or just on a busy street, but still feel totally isolated. Like there's an invisible wall between you and everyone else.
Totally. And then comes the homesickness, which can be surprisingly intense. It's not just missing your mom or your best friend, though that's obviously huge.
Hmm.
These sources talk about this deep ache for the little things, like the exact taste of a certain food, or hearing slang you instantly get, or just the background noise of your old street. That kind of nostalgia can really knock you off your feet.
It really can. And on top of all that, there's the actual challenge of making new friends, meaningful connections.
Yeah, the sources really highlight how hard that can be.
Locals often have their circles, built up over years. And maybe people you meet at school or work, they've got different things going on, partners, existing commitments. Finding those genuine, supportive friendships, eh, it's tough.
Someone even mentioned trying dating apps, but specifically stating they were just looking for friends.
Yeah, which just shows how difficult it can feel to build that social life from scratch in a new place.
It's the big emotions, but also the everyday stuff that wears you down.
Hmm.
What about those practical day-to-day hurdles? How do they make you feel like an outsider?
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets really practical, and you see how small things add up. The language barrier is
Mhm.
just huge. Obvious, maybe, but
Yeah.
huge. Source after source talks about the frustration, not being able to say what you mean, or not quite catching what someone else is saying, even in simple situations like asking for help in a shop or trying to understand a form. It just makes you feel, well, isolated, maybe even a bit stupid sometimes, or invisible.
Right, like you can't just easily be in the world.
Exactly. And then there's all the subtle culture shock moments in daily life. These sources have some great examples, like grocery shopping. Seems simple, right?
You'd think.
But one person shared needing a coin for the shopping cart, confusing if you've never seen that. Or suddenly realizing you're meant to bag your own groceries and you're fumbling around while everyone else seems to know exactly what they're doing.
Oh, God, those moments where you feel like you've got a spotlight on you because you missed some unwritten rule.
Precisely. Or think about how people make friends. The sources mention the difference between, say, the US, where striking up a chat with a stranger might be more common,
Yeah, like at a bar or something.
versus maybe some places in Europe where people are a bit more reserved initially. You might need a shared interest, like a hobby or a mutual friend, to really connect. So your usual ways of meeting people might just not work the same way.
So you can't just rely on being generally friendly. You need like a specific in, which is more effort.
It is. And even things like meal times. One source mentions Spain, where everyone seems to eat lunch around 2 p.m.
Right.
If you're used to grabbing something quick at noon, that feels different, maybe even isolating if everyone else is on a different schedule.
Little things, but they add up.
They do. They're not massive crises on their own, but when you face them day after day alone, they reinforce that feeling of being out of sync.
And then there's getting used to new money, figuring out buses or trains that work completely differently, maybe even just dealing with weather you're not used to. It's constant learning.
It's exhausting, especially when you're managing it all by yourself. Which brings us to a really crucial point in these sources: the actual impact all this loneliness has on your well-being.
Yeah, the sources don't mince words here. They talk about serious health risks. One even compared chronic loneliness to smoking, what was it, 15 cigarettes a day.
That's a figure often cited, yeah. It's not just feeling sad, it has real physical and mental health consequences.
It kills your motivation, apparently, increases the risk for depression and anxiety.
And it can make your thoughts spiral. When you're alone a lot, small worries can seem huge. Negative thoughts get amplified.
You really see that personal cost in the stories people shared. Just immense stress,
Hmm?
crying alone, struggling with things like difficult school assignments when the language is still a barrier,
Mhm.
or facing unexpected problems like your pet gets sick or you feel unwell and your usual support system, your family or friends, they're thousands of miles away.
Yeah, when your safety net isn't right there, even a small issue can feel overwhelming. And the comparison trap definitely kicks in too, right?
Oh, totally. Looking at others online or around you who seem to have it all figured out, making you feel like you're the only one finding it hard, that can really feed regret or feeling inadequate.
Okay, so it paints a pretty tough picture. But importantly, the sources also talk a lot about how people work through this, how they find ways to connect and support themselves.
Right, there's hope here too.
Absolutely. Many accounts describe this shift from feeling stuck to actually taking steps. And the first big insight seems to be acknowledge the loneliness, accept it.
Just let yourself feel it without judging yourself for it.
Exactly. Understanding it's normal, maybe even temporary, for this kind of huge life change. Being kind to yourself, self-compassion, is step one.
That sounds simple, but it's probably really powerful. And then it's about action.
Yes, being proactive is a huge theme. Taking action to find connection. The sources list loads of strategies. Joining groups based on interests comes up again and again.
Like sports teams, art classes.
Photography clubs, professional groups, language exchange meetups, anything where you share a passion. It gives you instant common ground, a reason to interact.
Makes sense. It lowers the pressure a bit. Obviously, online tools are massive now.
Oh, definitely. People find communities on places like Reddit, specific Facebook groups for expats in their city, using apps like Meetup or Eventbrite to find things happening locally.
Language apps too, right?
Yeah.
Not just for learning.
Yeah, like Tandem or italki. People use them to practice, sure, but also just to connect with others, maybe find potential friends. And like we mentioned, even dating apps used carefully and honestly just for friendship.
So using every tool in the box, really. Online and offline, professional networking comes up too.
It does. Building those connections, even if they start out more formal, and sometimes it's just about being brave enough to be direct.
Like actually telling people, hey, I'm new here, looking to make friends.
Exactly, and asking people to hang out. That vulnerability, the sources suggest, can actually be really effective.
And connecting with other immigrants seems key for many, people who just get it.
Yes, finding others who understand the specific ups and downs is incredibly validating. And sometimes it's the smaller connections too, becoming friendly with the security guard in your building or the person who makes your coffee every morning.
The little daily interactions.
They build up a sense of familiarity, of being seen, even if they're not deep friendships.
Okay, so that's looking outwards. But the sources also really stress looking inwards. Building your own internal support, getting comfortable being alone.
Yes. And this is where that difference between loneliness and solitude is so important. Loneliness is the painful lack of connection you want.
Right.
Solitude is choosing to spend time alone intentionally. For self-care, for reflection, it's actually healthy.
And how do you practice that? Solitude.
Well, the sources suggest actively making time for it, setting boundaries, and then filling that time with things you genuinely enjoy doing solo. Reading, maybe going to the movies or a gallery by yourself, exploring a new part of the city, cooking something nice just for you, exercising creative stuff.
Finding joy in your own company.
Exactly. And establishing routines can help too. Simple things like good sleep, eating well, mindfulness practices. One person mentioned finding real comfort in buying a nice salad bowl because it encouraged them to make healthy meals for themselves, finding routine and care in a small act.
And obviously, staying plugged into your network back home is crucial.
Vital. Regular calls, video chats with friends, family, it grounds you, gives perspective, provides that comfort when things are tough. Seeing other people pursuing passions can also be weirdly inspiring, apparently, whether it's people you follow online or just notice around you.
So looking at the whole arc described here, these struggles, they're not just negative experiences. They're framed as fuel for growth.
Consistently. That's a really strong message. Going through these challenges, figuring things out, it builds incredible resilience, adaptability.
You learn to problem solve on your own.
And you develop this deep sense of self-sufficiency. Like one person put it, you realize, okay, at the end of the day, I just have me. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You gain confidence by overcoming things you didn't think you could.
Your view of yourself changes. You realize you're stronger than you thought. And there's this lovely idea that feeling like an outsider, it doesn't last forever.
No, several sources mention that. Over time, the new place starts to feel less foreign. One day, maybe you notice it actually feels like home, sometimes even more so than where you came from.
Wow.
It takes work, building those connections, finding that comfort, but it seems absolutely possible.
So even with the hard days, the doubt, the loneliness,
Yeah.
the overall takeaway seems to be that it's worth it, that people keep going.
Yeah, the sources suggest it's a tough journey, no doubt, but ultimately rewarding. People choose to stick with it because the growth, the new life they can build, it makes the struggle worthwhile. It's pretty inspiring, really.
Wow. Okay. We've covered a lot there, from that initial, sometimes quite shocking, loneliness when you first arrive, through all the daily little challenges and the bigger emotional impact, and then into how people actively fight back, basically, building connections, finding strength inside themselves.
Yeah, it really shows moving abroad alone is this incredibly layered human experience, full of difficulties you might not expect, but also just massive potential for figuring out who you are.
So for anyone listening who's going through this right now, or maybe you know someone who is, hopefully hearing this helps. Knowing it's normal, it's hard, but also that people do find ways through it. There are strategies, there's hope.
Definitely. And maybe the final thought these sources leave us with is, well, perhaps the biggest journey isn't just moving countries. Maybe it's the internal journey that move kicks off.
How so?
Learning to be genuinely okay with yourself, finding the courage again and again to connect, and figuring out what belonging really means to you, not just tied to a place, but something you carry inside you, wherever you happen to be.